Welcome to the Stop Suffering in Silence podcast with your host, Denise Walsh and Rachel Timothy.
Hey, you guys. Welcome back to Stop Suffering in Silence. My name is Denise Walsh, and I'm here with co-host Rachel Timothy. And today we are going to do another reaction video to a video that you actually suggested in the comment section of our last video when we reacted to some allegations that have come out about Tim Ballard. First of all, thank you for those who watched and subscribed to that video and left feedback and comments. We are always willing and interested in engaging with you, hearing what you have to say, and learning from your experiences as well. Stop Suffering in Silence is a nonprofit geared towards educating about trauma and trafficking, as well as empowering those on the healing journey. And so we have speaking engagements that we do all over the country where Rachel shares her trafficking story, and we support survivors who come forward and tell us theirs. And so we've got several cohorts of girls groups where we do Zoom trainings and connection time and retreats. Those are in real life. But it's so much fun to be on the healing journey with others. So Rachel, you and I both listened to the requested or referred video that was in the comments section of the last video. And this one is by a man named Jimmy Rex. It's called the Jimmy Rex Show. And he was one of the operatives, if that's the word, like boots on the ground, part of the operations with OUR several years ago. And so he had another insider perspective that was really fascinating to hear more of.
It was. I'm thankful that you guys mentioned it, because it gave us more information as far as what they do in these operations, and it was kind of eye-opening. So there's a lot of things he said that I would love to just discuss with you, because it's what we do.
Yes, Rachel was like, I have a lot to say. And as we become cooler, we will learn how to edit him in and things like that. So as we continue to evolve, we'll maybe be able to edit clips in and things. But for now, we're just going to put the link to his video in the show notes below, so you can go watch it after you hear our commentary and show support to him as well. So there's a few things that both of us want to add. Why don't you start with something you learned, or something you wanted to discuss after listening?
Okay, well, I'll start with the part that fired me up. Oh, well, the whole part, really all of it fired me up. But I do appreciate the way that he explained things. I appreciate his honesty. Like, there were things that he even felt wasn't honorable for anybody to really be doing, and morally is why he stepped away from helping OUR for the time. So just his honesty and what it was all like, I really appreciated that. So the fact that I'm starting with a rant a little bit is no indication of how I feel about Jimmy Rex. I am just coming from a perspective of a survivor who I believe the numbers for trafficking victims right now is extremely high. I don't think anybody knows what the numbers actually are. But Jimmy was saying that he believes that really the numbers are much, much lower than some of the organizations claim, including what OUR claims. And he's coming from a perspective of, there were times when they were doing operations, they would go into towns to see if they could find traffickers and trafficking victims, and couldn't find any. And it was like, praise God, can't find any here. That's fantastic. We'll move on to the next town. And so I think in his mind, he kind of got the idea that maybe we are not seeing exact numbers when it comes to trafficking victims. From my perspective, though, I think the numbers are outrageous because of the way that internet and technology and devices and phones and all of that takes a part in this, and the exploitation of children.
Okay, so you're saying that, yes, there certainly could be old school trafficking where they bring a child to a party, and that certainly is a thing. But there's also other ways that trafficking is happening, meaning it could be where the child is on the video.
Right, yeah.
And that is being exploited.
Yes. And so there are so many different types of trafficking. Trafficking, the definition is really just somebody's making a profit off of some sort of a sexual activity, especially if it is a child involved in it. And so that can just be a video or a picture.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that somebody is taken. And maybe the taken piece is less than, what people are believing, but still very much so there's profit being made, unfortunately, off of humans.
Yeah. Well, and when you first mentioned, the internet, there's a ton more trafficking because of the internet. I was thinking about guys on the internet or Pornhub or some of these activity, right? I wasn't actually even thinking of the fact that the children, I mean, live streams, it could be videotapes that are sold over and over again. There's a lot of other ways that children are being trafficked that might not be in the red light district.
Oh, exactly. And he did make mention of, and I appreciated this, how majority of the time the person who is the trafficker is living in the same house with the kid. Like it's usually a caregiver. And that's the same thing that's happening in America.
Yeah. And we've also heard stories where the men come to their house. The children don't leave. The men come to their house and there's a spot in the basement all set up for it or whatever. So it does look differently than certainly Sound of Freedom portrayed.
Yes.
And I think that you're right. The numbers, nobody really would ever know the exact numbers, but
Right.
it's not happening.
Exactly. And I'm just to share an example with you. I recently met somebody who they had gotten a divorce recently, and come to find out the husband or ex-husband at that point had been videotaping some of their encounters together when they were married, and then was selling them. And she had no idea, no idea. And this was her spouse. So things like that. I mean, that is trafficking.
Right. Okay. I'll share one that I was interested in, and this is a conversation that I've had myself with myself. So it'll be good for us to talk about it. He mentioned the fact that when you talk about the problem, it becomes more an awareness for the world, right? And he wondered if talking about the problem actually made the problem bigger. And that's an interesting conversation, right? Because we know with the way that our brain works, when you start thinking about something, you start to see it more. My guess is it was always there.
Yeah.
So is talking about it making the problem worse and planting ideas in the brains of people who might have never even thought about participating in something like that?
I think that was more his point. Was it's almost like when you watch one of those like serial killer movies or whatever, and then you're like, why are they giving people ideas? Like, this is awful. It's kind of like that. Like, oh wait, I could make money and I have a little sister, and maybe they wouldn't have known that that was even a thing except for how loudly it's being talked about.
So, I mean, I don't know that we would just be guessing, right? Is that true? I don't know, but it is interesting to think about.
I don't think it's I don't think it's not true. I just think what are you going to do about it? You still have to raise awareness. You still have to be a voice for the voiceless.
Well, and the alternative is to not talk about it and then everything shoved under the rug and it's still happening, but nobody really knows what to look out for. Nobody knows the red signs. Teenagers or girls could be tricked more easily if they've never heard about it. And so you're right. The pros and cons of talking about it versus the pros and cons of not talking about it.
Yeah. And I think we'd be dumb to think that these kids don't see it on the internet. I mean, that they don't get these ideas from what they see online anyway. I think the fact that people are understanding what it is maybe will put a little bit of a fear in somebody that I don't want to get caught. I don't want to be known as a trafficker. I don't know.
Yeah. What else came to your attention?
I appreciated his honesty when it came to the operations, and how there were times when a couple different things. Like, for example, he said there were times that they would be going into these towns and they would be asking, questions to locals to see if there were trafficked victims. But in the process, finding some random guy who had almost implanted the idea, like he was like, oh well, I know my girlfriend and would do this and we could make some money. So this guy, this local young kid, like 20, ends up bringing his girlfriend to meet them, and Jimmy was like, you're not a trafficker. Is this your sister? Is this your girlfriend? Like, go home. Like, that's not what you are. But in his, what he was seeing was them going in and asking these things was giving these kids this idea of, okay, I'll do it this one time if it means I'll make money. And they weren't really putting away traffickers. They weren't really rescuing victims in that moment. It was just creating a situation to where that person said yes. And it was eye-opening to see that that is a reality of what their operations looked like at times.
And it sounds like too that he mentioned, or well, from what he said, that it has evolved. So there was a season when they just like all got in a flight or a plane and flew somewhere and we're going to go get them. But it feels like from what he said is that things over the years have shifted and they realized that just landing on the ground and trying to figure it out once you got there wasn't the best strategy. And so over the past few months, especially since Tim has left, the operations have been conducted a bit more strategically.
Which was super good to hear. Like super good to hear. I think they're doing more of figuring out online stuff so that they know where they're going, why they're going there, who they are exactly looking for based off what's been posted online. And that's smart. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is a good question for us all to be asking. And I would be very curious to hear more about how they plan their operations. And I wonder if there's a part that says they can't reveal all their secrets, or if they really could tell the public the strategy. So it's just interesting information to see how they are able to go get the bad guys, because he did mention several really great stings where they went in and they were able to get girls out or children out, and they were able to lock up the bad guys. And so in the midst of some sketchiness, it sounds like there were some really good ones too.
Exactly. Yeah. I also appreciated some of the background information as far as kind of where things shifted for Tim and when the power, it appears, went to his head. And I mean, we heard Jimmy explain about a fundraiser that they were doing, and apparently a slide was put up of a girl that was rescued, and Tim and his wife went ballistic because they weren't in the photo. That was literally their reason. Like, how dare you put a picture up that we aren't in, because this is our organization. And I think for everybody who's fighting so hard for these children, that has to just be a punch in the gut. Like, are you kidding? This isn't about you. It shouldn't be about you anyway. So it sounds like he was kind of there to see that shift.
Right. When it went from the children being the focus to Tim's ego being the focus, perhaps.
And one person put a comment in our video last time that said, innocent until proven guilty. And I mean, I get that. Like, that is the American way. And I don't want anybody who is innocent to be charged with anything. But here's the thing. Tim Ballard's not probably going to be charged with anything because these are adult women. And unfortunately, even though there could be manipulation and all sorts of things involved that coerce them into doing what Tim wanted them to do, legally, as an adult, if you're in that situation, you really don't have a chance at justice. So it's not that Tim's probably even going to be taken to court in these things, from what I'm gathering. And so there's not going to be an innocent versus guilty. But when you have 7 women stepping forward, and you have to validate that. You have to validate what they went through. And when you have other people who saw things and can validate it too, you can't dismiss this and say they're lying, innocent until proven guilty. That's hard for me to understand.
But I think another like shocking, or I get not another thing Jimmy said that I was reminded of. And so it's not necessarily shocking, but it's still frustrating is he reminded me that they don't go there and to save any woman. They have to make sure that they're under the age of 18, that they're considered a child. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, anyone who's being owned and operated by a pimp doing something against their will should be saved. But I was reminded that adult women aren't seen in that same way. They're not seen as someone who they're seen as someone who could just leave if they wanted to. So they must want to be there. And we know that that's just not true. And so it's heartbreaking to be reminded that they're not going to just save every woman. And so these women that came forward with Tim are similar in the sense that they might not have the grounds to press charges criminally or civilly if there was some sort of consent that was given. And so it's hard to understand.
It's hard, yeah, especially because we've talked on here before about the spas in America where you have international women who are brought in, and because they're adults, there seems to be this like cops can't do anything. Cops can't rescue them. They are enslaved inside these buildings and nobody can get to them and help them. Like, it doesn't make sense simply because they're over the age of 18. Right. Doesn't mean abuse isn't happening.
Well, and I think that's the thing to remember is that the physical abuse happens after the coercion, after the manipulation, after the mind games, after the, in your Reflecting Ownership book, which is a trauma program, you talk about how the perpetrator takes ownership of your mind and your heart and your spirit, your will, and then your body oftentimes. And so it can be very confusing for the survivor to realize what just happened. Like, they thought they were in a relationship, or they thought that, and by the time the physical abuse comes out, there's been so much more. It's just way deeper than what it seems on the surface sometimes.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, it's what's happening overseas is it's happening right here too. And laws have to change, I think, in my opinion.
Right. I think what, we were talking about that before we pressed record is how come women aren't, or adult men too. I mean, of course, there's all sorts of trafficking happening, all sorts of people being owned. And so the law would have to be some sort of proof that the ownership was happening rather than, oh, you must have chose it.
Yeah. And I think I don't know. I really don't know how it would work, because you're going to have some of these women who are too scared to speak out no matter what. But I think when at the end of the day, when you're looking at the abuse that they're experiencing, or when you're looking at somebody who's being sold for somebody else's profit, you have to see that there is nothing healthy about that. And they're going to need a chance to get out and be safe before they ever voice that.
Right. Healing happens when you feel safe.
Yeah.
When you are not safe, you're living in fight or flight mode. You are not in a place where you can breathe deeply and start that healing journey. So you're right. Most people aren't going to, in that moment, run to the police and claim what's happening. They need a minute to get out, to get safe, to let their nervous system start to die down and like rest. And then healing can start.
Exactly. And honestly, like during 4th of July and all of these celebrations that we have here in America, or when we're singing about the land of the free, I'm going to be honest, like it tears me up, because there are so many who are not free right here in our country. And it's just a different form of slavery. And I am ready for us to recognize it and help them in a way that's actually helping them.
So what else did Jimmy mention that you want to bring up?
So one of the things he did bring up that was eye-opening to me, and I have heard like through different conversations, where people say, well, this person said this and that person said this. But getting to hear Jimmy speak from a firsthand encounter of where Tim had almost changed the whole goal of OUR at one point, and it had more to do with converting people to Mormonism instead of actually rescuing children, or maybe it was a both and. But he had some sort of a plan designed where at the end of the day, he really just wanted everybody to convert to becoming a Mormon. And it caught everybody off guard. There's people who they stepped away from OUR for that reason, because it was no longer just, helping those who are being trafficked. I don't know. So that was interesting for me to hear. Again, it really just goes back to Tim and the power and agenda.
Right. Right. Yeah, they talked a lot about his business plan, which as a business owner, like you have a business plan, you have to find a way to make money, you have to find a way to provide good service for, like I get it. But it sounded like he was using these nonprofits to fund Tim Ballard. And, again, it's just interesting information to see what really is the heart behind it all. So I would love to hear from OUR, right? I would love to know what is true for them. What is their heart now? Who is their CEO now? And what is his heart? And how do the operations work? And is there aftercare? Because I know Jimmy mentioned that he tried to find details or hear more about what happened to the kids that came out, and he couldn't. But we've heard that they've got great aftercare and that, there's a lot of systems in place for that. So I would love to hear from them, and not just their PR, not just their press release of beautiful, shiny, but from the people who are in the operations. I'd love to hear more about what's true today.
And I think the connections that you and I have, we have heard from both of them about the safe houses and what that's like. And so that's helpful for you and I. But yeah, I think for those who haven't had a chance to get to hear what they're like, I think absolutely, because people, at the end of the day, we know trafficking's happening. We know these organizations need to exist to continue to rescue children. But we need to know who is safe to support.
Yeah. And I think one way to there's two things predators do. Predators isolate and really enjoy power. So it's like my way or the highway, black and white thinking. I'm right, you're wrong, and don't hang out with anyone who disagrees with me is really what perpetrators or cult leaders do. And so one thing that would give me I want to say a green flag, okay, this is it. If it would feel good to have the power dissipated, not one person, but the influence, the power, the decision making being a few people, for it to be a collaboration versus top down, for there to be open for ideas and discussion, and all of that is a healthy organization versus a cult-like organization. And so that's what I would want to look whether it's on social media or talking to people that are working there or whatever the case may be. I would want to be looking for signs of a healthy organization versus a cult-like organization, which is top heavy, top down, black, white.
Yeah. Which I will say, this just kind of came to my mind. OUR got Tim out. I mean, they got the bad out. And I think that shows healthy individuals inside who really are about the children. I know the contact that we have, when talking to him about the allegations, I mean, he was furious. And he said, even before these allegations came out about Tim, this organization shouldn't be about Tim Ballard. I mean, he has been saying that to us since we met him. It needs to be about the kids.
Right.
And so that's encouraging to me. And I think the fact that OUR got out the bad apple shows maybe there's, people inside who are really wanting to do the right thing.
Yeah.
They're in it for the right reasons.
Yep. Yep. And I think that's just we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Jimmy mentioned that the women are getting ready to speak.
Yeah, that it's going to be worse than what we thought. Good
So,
for them.
and it's not about, oh, I think that's the thing, is that I would hope that OUR can still have a voice despite what Tim Ballard has been doing.
Yes, yeah. And I just want to say I'm super amazed and proud of these women and the fact that they're willing to stand up and speak about what was happening. And I hope that that trauma informed people converse with them and say the right things and don't pass along judgment and all that sort of things. But yeah, Jimmy was talking about how, like families were destroyed in the midst of some of the things that Tim did because it there were affairs and there were things like that. And so I mean, there was one comment I think in our video where somebody mentioned listen to, is it Catherine Ballard or what's
Yeah,
her name? Is it Catherine?
I believe
Listen
so.
to her comment. And I didn't, because I didn't want to. I just didn't want to hear after Jimmy explained about how her response was with the fact that they weren't in a picture. It gave me a kind of a sour taste of her, and it made me feel like maybe she's going to support him more for other reasons than, like a spouse.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to know the truth.
I
And
know.
and I think that's where all we can do, right, is make decisions based on the information we know at that time, trust our own gut, stay in alignment, and not give people too much power. They don't need to have, like, people are people. And so I don't know.
Yeah, I think what we all can be doing right now is praying for Tim, praying for his wife, praying for their 9 kids, praying for the organization as a whole, because yeah, this is Satan winning. And yeah, so let's just kind of join them all in prayer and hopes for a better future.
Well, we would love to continue to hear your comments and your thoughts and your wisdom. I am a clinical psychologist and come to the conversation through that lens. Rachel is a trafficking survivor and has another perspective to add to the conversation. If you do not know Rachel's story, check out Open Blind Eyes. It's available on Amazon. It's a hard read, but you can read it in a weekend. And the cool thing is you know how it ends because she's sitting right here. So definitely check it out. But it's a really great example. It's a powerful example of what trafficking can look like here in the States. And we speak to churches and teachers and nurses and police officers and do home events and things like that too, because you're right. Whether we like it or not, it is happening. And the more that we can know, the more that we can keep our kids safe and prepare ourselves and our children for protection at the very least.
Yeah. And I think that's I'll just add this, another neat thing about OUR is they are wanting to hear what's going on in the States. It's not that they're trying to cover any of that up. It's just we do have law enforcement where, a lot of these countries overseas don't, that know what they're doing anyway. And so I really love that OUR has given us a chance to speak and let me share my story.
Yeah, that was really one of the things that I super respected from the
Yeah.
guys that we met was they were very interested in listening. They
Yeah.
didn't come to the table like, well, we're OUR. We know everything about trafficking. They asked a lot of questions and they were very interested in learning about you and your story and how things worked here. And I felt I was really glad to hear that because their egos could get in the way. They did get national attention. They did have a movie just come out, and they certainly could have let that go to even the organization's head, but the people we met, it didn't. And they were really great listeners and asked a lot of good questions. So
Yeah.
there's hope. I pray that there's hope and that the organization doesn't fall with Tim.
Yes, I agree.
All right, you guys, this is our conversation for today. Thank you for connecting with us and being here. If you are interested in learning more about Stop Suffering in Silence, please check out our website, stopsuffering.org. Comment, like, share. We are here to talk about all things trauma and trafficking, as well as empower those on the healing journey. So have an amazing day, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your school, your church, or on your podcast, then please email openblindeyes@protonmail.com. If you are interested in sponsoring a survivor on their healing journey and would like to donate to Stop SIS, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below, or you can email stopsis@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence, or you know somebody who is, whether they're dealing with a current trauma or one from the past, then we will always recommend that you reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.